Inspiring interviews with today's top landlords. This is the Rental Income Podcast. And now, Dan Lane.
Mike, why did you first start buying rentals?
So the reason why I started buying rentals properties is because I had a successful fix and flip business. And when you have that, I had a huge tax liability.
So you were paying too much in taxes and you figured out if you bought rental properties that would cut down your tax bill?
Correct. Yep.
There's so many different strategies to make money with rental properties, but if you're buying properties that are cash flowing and at the same time they're legally saving you money on your taxes, that makes a lot of sense to me. And on the podcast today, we're going to talk about what Mike's doing. We'll talk about his strategy and how much money this is actually saving him in taxes. Mike is investing out of state. We'll talk about how he's making that work. And we'll also take a look at his portfolio. We'll go over his numbers and figure out how much profit his rental properties generate for him. Joining us on the show today from Columbia, South Carolina is Mike Mannino. We'll take a quick break to thank our sponsors. We'll come right back and we'll talk to Mike. I've had tenants that have either broken their leases or stopped paying rent, and I'm sure you know that this can be very expensive. It's very easy for the cost to exceed the amount of money that you're holding for a security deposit, and because of this risk, I started using the guarantors to guarantee my leases. The guarantors protect your rental income against rent defaults, vacancy loss, lease breaks, holdovers, and more. And this is all at no cost to you. Your tenants pay for the insurance premium. If you want to learn more about their platform, check out my bonus episode from September 15th, 2022. It's titled, Is This Better Than a Security Deposit? If you're ready to sign up, you can enroll within minutes by visiting theguarantors.com. Again, that's theguarantors.com. It's a lot of work to find a really good rental property, and when you actually find that property, you want to make sure you're working with a lender that can get that loan closed. The lender that I recommend is Chaley Ridge from Ridge Lending Group. She's a nationwide lender, and her specialty is helping investors finance rental properties. She has a ton of loan programs, and she can find something customized to you for your situation. If you want to find out more or you're ready to get started today, just go to ridgelendinggroup.com. That's RIDGE lendinggroup.com. NMLS 42056.
Rental Income Podcast.
Michael, so a lot of the guests that we have on this show are buying rentals for cash flow. Now, with you buying rental properties to save money on taxes, are your rentals still making money or do you operate at a loss?
That's a very good question. So I also like to buy on cash flow as well. So all my properties do make money over time. Maybe upfront they don't, because a lot of the properties I buy are these very distressed properties where we have to go in and gut the whole thing and kick all the tenants out, and then we can bring this property back to life. And then once we're done with that process, then it is a cash cow.
Walk me through how this works. How can you save money on taxes when you're actually making money on the cash flow every month?
That's a very good question. So the IRS has something where you're allowed to deduct the property over 27 and a half years. And what a cost segregation report does is allow you to shrink that into 1 year. So instead of us, on this example of this 11 unit, I bought taking off maybe $1,000 a month in paper losses, we were able to bring that all at once, and we were able to reduce our active income by $170,000.
Wow. Okay. So, all right. So you get all the depreciation in year one. So then you don't have it the rest of the years, but in that year one, you get a huge tax savings.
Correct. Yep.
How walk me through how you get that report. Like, is that something that someone walks through the property and evaluates how long different parts of the property have left, or how does, like, walk me through how that works?
Yeah. So It's very simple for me as as the business owner and the consumer for it. I basically write a check to someone for $3,500 or $5,000, and they go through. They're taking photos. They're looking at the lights and the flooring and the cabinetry and door handles, everything. You should see this itemized list. It's like a couple thousand items. And what they do is instead of depreciating it over 27 and a half years, they're saying, hey, you know what? The carpet might only last 2 years, right? Because if you're changing tenants, carpet doesn't last that long. It doesn't last 27 and a half years. So basically, though, someone goes in, they take a bunch of photos of everything, they write up this huge report, and they're saying, hey, Mike, you are able to depreciate this whole building in year one by $170,000 instead of depreciating the building over 27 and a half years.
And that translates that depreciation that you're taking in year one, that in this case, in this building that you actually bought, you actually saved $170,000 in taxes.
Yeah, so $170,000 in taxable income. So how that works, let's say my fix and flip business, I made $170,000 this year. I'm able to depreciate $170,000 this year from this building. Then I am showing a zero taxable income. So that's how it works, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Now, I would think the downside would be that if you're taking all that depreciation in year one, you get this huge tax write-off, but then for the next 26 and a half years, you don't really have a write-off anymore. So would that be the downside to this?
Yep. So that is the downside. And a lot of people, and then too, if I maybe held this building for only a few years, then when I sell the building, I'm going to recapture what I didn't use. But the nice thing is, which a lot of people, when they ask me this, like, hey, Mike, when you sell it, aren't you going to have a recapture tax? I'm like, yes, that is very, very true. But I'm not going to not buy real estate anymore, right? So when I sell my 11 unit, I'm going to buy a 48 unit, and I'm going to write off then maybe even $1 million. So I might be recapturing some of that 170,000, but now I'm going to have $1 million write-off. If that makes sense.
Okay. So this works as long as you keep buying real estate. So every year you've got to make sure that you're buying something else. Otherwise, you're going to have a huge tax problem.
Correct.
Now, tell me about the fix and flip business. So are you buying single family houses and flipping them?
Yep, that's exactly it. So we have a very successful single family fix and flip business up in Michigan. Right now, I'm actually in South Carolina. I have a great team in place that allows me to travel the world and, live anywhere. So we buy about 20 houses per year. These are the first time home buyer homes, 1,000 to 2,000 square feet. We're buying these in a range of 100,000 and selling them for about 200,000. And we just have a really great automated system for that.
For the properties that you're buying for rentals, is it the same type? Are you just holding on to some of the properties that you're flipping, or do you have a different strategy for the properties you're keeping as rentals?
Great question. So I actually don't keep any single family houses as long-term rentals. I only keep apartment buildings as long-term rentals. And a quick example of why is on my 11 unit, it's broken up into 3 buildings. And 2 of the buildings are, there's 4 units in each building. And we had to replace the roof to both of those buildings. And each building cost us about $10,000 for a new roof. So we paid about $20,000. But if I had 8 units spread out around the state or the city, I would be paying about $7,000 per roof times 8 units is a lot heavier roof replacement bill, if that makes sense.
Sure. Now, I would imagine, too, with the kind of depreciation that you're looking for, that you would have to buy a lot more houses than apartment buildings.
Correct, yeah.
So it's a little bit easier. Now, so with you being in real estate full time, both with the rentals and with the flipping, I guess you qualify as real estate professional status for taxes.
Yep.
Now, is that a big part of making this whole thing work? Like, if you were, say, an engineer, like you wouldn't be able to get the same type of deduction, right?
Correct. Yeah, it's because I'm a full-time real estate investor, so I can write off of my active income. But like you said, if I was like an engineer or something, that huge depreciation of that 170,000, I wouldn't have been able to take, all at once.
Right. Yeah. So that's if anyone is thinking about doing this, you really want to talk to a tax person, make sure you're doing this right. But in general, if you're flipping houses or you're a realtor or doing something real estate related, you get a lot more tax breaks. So tell me about your portfolio. Tell me about your rental portfolio.
Yeah, so we have we actually just sold a 6 units. So we have 44 units right now of throughout, mostly in Michigan and one in North Carolina. And I have 2 Airbnbs. Those are on the lake up in Michigan. Those are the only houses that I keep, but those are short-term rentals. And so that's the portfolio.
So with living in Michigan or living in South Carolina, your rentals in Michigan, are you self-managing that or do you have a local property manager?
Great question. So I have a manager for each one of my businesses. I have a local manager for my rentals. I have a manager for my Airbnbs, and I have someone who's boots on the ground managing my fix and flip business as well.
Okay. So you've got everything kind of parsed out to different people. How has it been working with your rental property managers? How has that been working out for you?
I've been very, very blessed. I've only had to fire one property manager, but the rest have been great. And in Michigan, the nice thing is since we have, 30 something units up there, we're actually consolidating into one property manager who's a little bit bigger. We're able to save on some of the fees, which is kind of funny because we pay about 8% in fees for management. And our property manager is so great. They're saving us money on trash. They're increasing the rents. They're paying for themselves and more for the management fee that we pay. So we actually make more money having someone else manage the properties.
Have you had any problems with the managers?
Yeah. One of them, I laughed because this was the craziest experience. So on my 11 unit that we bought, I tried to do my best to verify and vet like the best property manager out there because my time is best spent like fixing and flipping houses, chasing $35,000 checks instead of like $800 checks, right? So I don't mind paying a little bit more in fees for the best property manager. So we had this property manager, and I don't know how they were recommended and how they managed so many units, but it was like the worst 6 months experience of my life. They weren't collecting rents, or they were collecting rents, but not giving us the rents. They would refuse to pay the $35 monthly fee to Zillow to post our properties on there for extra exposure. It was just like nonstop, just a battle dealing with the property manager. And it was actually a costly one too. They managed the property for 6 months. We let them go, and inside of their contract, they had us pay the fees, their management fees. I think it was like 10% of the leases they put onto the property. So when we let them go, we had to actually cut them a check for like $4,000 or $5,000 because they put tenants in the units for us. And they're saying, hey, we're missing out on all these fees, so you have to pay us and catch us up on all these fees. So for us going through a headache and hiring this property manager who wasn't doing their job, we still got punished and had to pay about a $4,000 or $5,000 fee.
Now, how do you think you could have avoided that? Because, I guess it was in the contract. So, you did you miss that, or when you hired them, were you just not thinking one day I might fire this manager?
Yeah, it's kind of like, dating, right? When, it's going to be great. We're going to do all these great things together. Things are going to be awesome. And then you're like, oh no, who is this person?
Right, right.
So, now I know though. So I hope, you can learn
Yeah.
from my mistakes is to have an attorney read all of your contracts and definitely look out for that breakup clause.
Yeah. And so they also were stealing your rent, like they weren't forwarding the rent onto you?
Yeah, they weren't, and I don't know if they stole, but it was like months would go by. We're like, hey, where's our rent? Where's our rent? So I think when we broke up from each other, they took that 4 or 5 grand out of the money that they owed us.
Okay. Well, it sounds like you're better off now. It sounds like you have a better manager
Yes.
now. So
Yeah.
let's take a look at one of your deals and see how everything's going. I love looking at the numbers. Before we get into that, tell me about this property.
Yeah, so this is an 11-unit apartment building up in Michigan, near Flint, not in the city of Flint. So we don't buy our properties in Detroit or Flint, but on the outskirts, the cities that touch it. So this is an 11-unit apartment building that we bought in 2020. So during like the pandemic, right? And there was a lot of the eviction moratoriums are going on, and that's why the seller decided to sell because out of this 11 units, I think 8 or 9 were occupied, but of those 8 or 9, only 3 or 4 were actually paying their rent.
Wow. Okay, so you had a lot of work to do to get before you could even fix the property up. You had to get everybody out of there.
Yeah, so I was going to say to paint the picture. So these are 2 bedroom, a lot of these are 2 bedroom units, and the rents are going for $500 per month, which is cheap even in Michigan standards, right?
Yeah.
It kind of looked like the cars were beat up, kind of looked like a drug den. It was honestly, it's in a nice city, and the police knew about it. They were always there. It was the eyesore of the whole entire city.
So now with the eviction moratoriums going on, like, did you have to sit on the property for a while before you could get people out?
Yeah, so when we purchased the property, what we like to do is work with the tenants. We're letting them know, hey, we're going to be renovating all the units. So what we always do is offer cash for keys. So we, prepared to have $1,000 per tenant. They're only paying $500 a month. So $1,000 goes a long way in their pocket.
Sure.
So we offered each tenant $1,000, cash for keys for them to leave so that we can, occupy the property and get in there and start working.
So you got everybody out before you started doing any work on the property?
Yeah, correct. Yep.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Now, how much did you pay for the property?
Yeah, so for this 11-unit apartment building, we paid $347,000.
And I assume it needed a ton of work. How much did you spend on the rehab?
Yeah, so the total rehab budget came up to just under $200,000 for the renovations.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. So you're all in at $547,000. Now, how much is your mortgage payment today?
So our mortgage payment today, and the nice thing is we actually bought it. We did a refinance and got all of our money out. So we have no more money into the deal. And our mortgage is $3,000 a month.
$3,000. Okay. Now let's talk about some of your other expenses. So that $3,000, that is just your principal and interest payment, right? Doesn't
correct.
include. Okay. So how much, if you're to break down the taxes and insurance on a monthly basis, how much do you spend every month on taxes and insurance?
Yeah. So the tax and insurance is about $1,200 per month.
Okay. Now, other expenses, do you have any utilities that you have to pay?
Yep. So we pay the heat and the water and sewer for the property.
Okay. And how much does that come out to be?
That's going to be about $1,500 a month on average.
Okay. And I guess your other expenses would be management. You've got a property manager. So how much do you spend on management every month?
That comes to about $800 per month.
$800. Okay. Are there any other expenses, or is that I guess you're going to have some repairs every now and then. How do you budget for repairs?
the nice thing is we just keep depreciating and depreciating, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. Well, that sounds like a pretty good deal. Now, let me ask you this before we wrap things up here. Now, as someone that is flipping houses, doing a lot of rehab work on the apartments, are there any tips you can share with us on like cheap ways that you can make a property look better or rent for more money?
Yeah, so I'll share an example we actually are doing right now on my 16-unit apartment building up in North Carolina. So this is a 1960s build and has original wood cabinetry, and it's gorgeous wood cabinets. But the thing is, it's kind of like weathered because it's, 80 years old at this point. So instead of ripping out the cabinets and spending $4,000 for a new kitchen or even painting the cabinets, what we've done was dip a rag and stain and go over the cabinets with some fresh stain. So then these older cabinets are just soaking it up and they look way, way, way better. And we're going through and also replacing the handles and hinges because those are kind of gross and, they have like grease and dirt all in them. So for just a couple $100, we're replacing the hinges, the handles, and restaining the cabinetries and getting the full market rents we would be getting as if we spent $4,000 replacing the cabinets.
It's all about being smart with your money, and that is a great way to get a great return without spending a ton of money. Recently, Mike made $175,000 wholesaling an apartment building, and he made a video about it. If you want to see it, I've got a link to it on the website. You can find it at rentalincomepodcast.com/episode 443. I'd like to thank Chaley Ridge from Ridge Lending Group for sponsoring today's episode. If you're looking to buy a rental property, whether you're just getting started or you want to add to your portfolio, reach out to Chaley. She's a nationwide lender, and she specializes in helping investors finance rental properties. She has a ton of different loan programs, and she can find something that'll work for you in your situation. If you want to find out more or you want to set up a time to talk to Chaley personally, you can reach out to her at ridgelendinggroup.com. That's RIDGE lendinggroup.com, NMLS 42056. Thank you so much for checking out the podcast today. Make sure you hit that follow button or the subscribe button, depending on what platform you're listening on, and you'll get notified every single Tuesday when I put out a new episode. My name is Dan Lane, and this has been the Rental Income Podcast.